Let me just start off with this question to you. Someone said to me, you may not know it, but you owe your career in this business to Dr. Parker. And I said, wait a minute, what do you mean by this? And she began to tell me a little bit about your history, and I went to go and read, and I had no idea that you were behind the EEOC and so many changes in this country that opened the doors for women, for minorities in this business.
We're a nation made up of many lines of people coming from all over the world, and they have a right to be served by these broadcasting stations. What happened was Martin Luther King came to New York, and Truman Douglas, who was head of our Board of Home Missions, had luncheon with him. And
this is during the civil rights struggle. Yeah.
So, but King said, "Why don't you do something about the way we're being treated in the South?"
Throughout the South, the stations almost universally denigrated blacks. They wouldn't allow blacks on the air. When blacks were attacked, they wouldn't let them reply. They didn't use courtesy titles with blacks. They didn't say Mr., Mrs., or Ms. No way.
So I went down and I went all through the South and looked at the stations, and then decided that WLBT in Jackson, to make a long story short, we did this monitoring of a week. Of course, you had to sit there for a week and look at everything and write it down in those days.
You didn't have any way of finding out what they had on the air unless you actually watched and recorded every minute that they were on the air. So we did that, and then we went to the commission and we said that this station was violating the act by discriminating against blacks, but there were a lot of other things that they were doing. It just happened that they were running Ku Klux Klan programs, that they had a Ku Klux Klan bookstore on their premises.
We did force the EEO rules on the FCC.
Were you ever fearful? I mean, you were taking on the establishment, and they weren't happy. It was a time of great struggle.
It's just by luck that I wasn't shot. They were waiting for us, and the sheriff's deputies followed us all the way up the Mississippi Delta.
So today, 2008, we're obviously at a much different place now, but there's still a lack
there's still plenty to be done.
Diversity in some areas.
Yes.
There are a lot of diverse faces on air, but when you go to the corporate boardrooms and when you go to the areas of decision making at all of the networks, you don't see that many faces of color.
No, the only person is, of course, is retiring from Time Warner right now.
How much does that concern you?
It concerns me a lot. That there's been only one woman that ever reached a decision-making position, as far as I know, in a network, and she was president of NBC for a while. She was certainly the only woman that has been in a real decision-making position at a network, as far as I know.
And the corporate bosses, the big bosses, that's where the real power is.
That's where the power is, yes.
Even though we see people on the air. Well, I see some of the young folks back here nodding their heads. They obviously have a sense of the history and how much you owe your positions at this point, or the places you hope to go to Dr. Parker. So why don't we throw open the floor to some questions, and if any of you would like to ask a question, we have someone with the mic.
How you doing, Dr. Parker? I'm Stephen Martinez, a freshman at Columbia University, and I was just wondering, of all your numerous accolades and achievements, which do you consider most significant and why?
Well, I think the most significant thing I've done is to start the foundation.
The Emma Bowen Foundation.
Yes, what's called the Emma Bowen Foundation now. It was started, incidentally, because Emma had a bunch of women, and she kept after the stations, and she had an annual meeting, and all the stations appeared there. She had an advanced degree from Fordham University. She was a very intelligent woman. When she retired, we formed the Foundation for Minority Interests in Media, and then we sat around as directors and said, what are we going to do with this thing? And I proposed that we try this business of training young people, having them work for companies.
So this foundation was a way to
Yes.
train minorities, but
Yeah.
also get them in the system?
Emma was eventually on the board, but when she died, Henry Rivera, who had been an FCC commissioner, and he said, we're going to rename this the Emma Bowen Foundation for Minority Interests in Media.
How was it that you were able to keep so much grace under fire? How were you able to continue to push yourself forward even though there was a threat of death and lots of people around you who didn't want to see you succeed?
Well, it's the church. I couldn't have done this if the church hadn't, if the United Church of Christ hadn't been behind me. The church stood behind this in general. The legal actions had never been done by a church before, and the one thing that worried me, and I had real reason to worry, was that the church would be sued back. So I formed the Office of Communication Incorporated of the United Church of Christ, and I did everything under that label.
To protect the church.
To protect the church, and OC Inc. still exists and still is working as hard as it can. As far as this matter of getting people of color and people of other cultures into jobs, we now have 51 companies that are supporting the foundation, and that is a big number, and among them are most of the large broadcasting people.
I thank you for what you've done for my career, and we owe so much of it to you. And Dr. Parker, thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
This was really, really a lot of fun.
Well, I think the most significant thing I've done is to start the foundation, what's called the Emma Bowen Foundation now.